Hey everyone, we're ranking Lives of P bosses today. That's what we're doing. Lives of P, bosses, here we are, here we go. That's right, I'm Medium Beetle, we're ranking bosses today. This is what we're doing, baby. Here we go! But before we really get into it, I'd like to make a few things clear. As you're probably aware, there are massive spoilers ahead. This game is an absolute masterpiece, and if you haven't played through the game, I highly recommend doing so before watching this video. Also, all of the footage you're going to see is from my first playthrough. In this video, I will only be ranking major bosses, and when I say major, I mean bosses that give you trophies or achievements. And while I understand that other bosses are unskippable, extremely well designed, and feel important to the story, I'd like to keep this ranking simple and will probably make a larger ranking including them down the line. I'll be judging these bosses mainly on my overall experience fighting them, but will also take into account their overall aesthetic and how they fit into the story. Also, I should mention that I did all of these fights outside of the final 3 before patch 1.02. I did this playthrough without any summons and without spamming throwables, outside of one boss fight where I spammed the life out of this guy with absolutely no remorse. And while it did feel cheap and sort of like a stain on my playthrough, it also felt super justifiable, and like the boss deserved it, so how bad could I really feel? And I'll get into why I did that when I talk about this boss, don't worry. This game allows for a wide variety of playstyles, so I understand that a boss that I find easy may have been hard for others, or the other way around. I don't expect everyone to like this list, but I do expect everyone to respect it, since my opinion is correct and better than yours. And with that being said,
let's do this.
The worst fight in the game is easily the second Black Rabbit fight. I hope you trust me when I say I have a lot of thoughts about this fight, but since I feel its discussion directly ties into a fight that ranks a lot higher on this list, I'm gonna refrain from doing so until we get there. Coming in a solid 12th place is Fallen Archbishop Andreas. First off, I gotta say that I love the design of this thing, and the build-up leading to its reveal was intense. When you walk into the cathedral, you get a small glimpse of some worm-like tendril before it shoots down a massive hole in the floor, leaving me to wonder just what the hell I'd be up against later on. If this ranking were purely based on aesthetic, Archbishop would be higher on this list, but I was not a fan of the fight itself. Its phase 1 attacks were relatively lackluster outside of its tongue swipes, which I thought were pretty cool. Its right arm swipe had a delayed timing that I found difficult to react to even when I knew it was coming. And for having such a big menacing mouth, I expected maybe some bite attack, or thought maybe he'd spew decay on the floor, but no, he just swings his tongue. Phase 2 feels like a missed opportunity. We finally get to fight the worm-looking thingy that we saw before. It looked extremely cool, but unfortunately this phase does a poor job of implementing new mechanics for this new form, with there being no real incentive to engage with it. Locking onto the worm often resulted in the camera going wild, as it seemingly couldn't position itself so I could see myself and the monster at the same time. This not only made me feel like there was no real reward for engaging, but that I was being penalized for trying to do so. This incentive is further suppressed once I realized that I could just run to the other side of the monster and fight the same form I'd already learned from phase 1 with minimal variation. It does a special charge blast move when it's at low health, which can feel really cheap if you're unsure where to stand to avoid it, especially after having fought through at least a health bar and a half. I thought this boss was harder than it had to be at such an early stage of the game, since my pulse cells healed less than some of the hits from the boss, who was capable of taking away over half my health with a single swipe. With only 6 pulse cells and 1 shitty cube, there was not as much room for error as I'd expect from something that's this early in the game. I think the patch missed the mark by simply nerfing the health of phase 1. I think giving the player an opportunity to upgrade the effectiveness of a pulse cell before this point would have made the fight feel a lot more manageable. I also think that increasing the damage done to the boss by attacking its new form would have given enough incentive for the player to actually want to fight it. Overall, it was a cool boss, it just missed the mark for me. Coming in 10th, we've got the Parade Master. I think Parade Master is a good first encounter to teach new players the fundamentals of combat. Outside of that, I don't think he's anything too special, especially when comparing him to the rest of the roster. He only ranks higher than the previous two because there's nothing that I thought was fundamentally wrong with the fight. I thought it was pretty cool when he uses his head as a weapon in the second half of the fight. And yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. It's pretty badass. This fight helped me figure out the parry system, and while I had a hard time blocking his slam attack at first, once I got the timing down, it became my bread and butter. If you parry enough, you can actually break his weapon, which makes the fight that much more simple. There's also a cool picture of him in one of the opening clips depicting the puppet frenzy, where he's got a bunch of bodies in the cage that he holds over his back, adding a little extra weight to his character post-fight. Up next, we got Champion Victor. He has a cool design, I guess, but he kinda reminds me of Bane a little too much. At the same time, there's a reason he looks that way. He's the product of the Alchemist's experimentation, and since we see other enemies in that area with similar tubes and whatnot, I'm sort of accepting of his design. But when it comes to the fight itself, I found it to be sort of a pushover. This boss only took me 4 attempts. Once I figured out I could dodge to his side, the fight was basically over. I don't think he had to be such a punching bag. I think that they could have made this fight a bit harder without it being too overwhelming. There's a mini-boss right before this fight with a similar fighting style, and this mini-boss has quicker follow-up attacks than Victor, while still leaving enough time for me to attack in between. So it felt confusing when Victor would just let me get so many hits in between his attacks. Yes, Victor hit hard, but it was easy not to get hit. Dodging was the name of the game in this one. I only fought his second phase once, so maybe I missed something, but from what I could tell, there was only a slight difference between phases. He ranks higher than the other 3 because his lack in difficulty allowed me to breathe a little after an intense run of grueling and frustrating battles, so for that, I do thank him. He ranks lower than everyone else on this list though, because he's a sack of potatoes. He's a sack of potatoes. He's not that good. In 9th place is Fuoco the Glorified Furnace. In a game with such a wide variety of unique and distinct encounters, I found Fuoco to be the most forgettable of the major bosses. When it came to making this ranking, I almost forgot to include him. Even so, Fuoco was actually quite a solid and challenging encounter. This boss had such a different feel to its fighting style in contrast to the earlier bosses. It helped me realize that parrying is not the only option for dealing with boss attacks, and sometimes dodging to the side is the more viable response. And with this being the 3rd main fight in the game, it felt like this lesson came at the perfect time. Outside of its ability to teach me about how I should approach combat, his moves were pretty simple and straightforward. His first phase consists of varying heavy attacks and a running charge attack that I preferred to move out of the way for rather than try to parry. Some of his swings were predictable while others felt hard to properly time. His second phase has some moves that I found to be a little cheap. He'll spatter oil all over the floor and then follow up by firing flame rounds out of his blunderbuss, which ignites the oil. It's not too bad, but sometimes I found myself not paying attention to where the oil patches were, which resulted in me taking massive damage. He also does a flaming AoE attack across the majority of the floor that can be avoided by running behind a pillar, but I unfortunately did not figure that out before I beat him, so I was forced to run to the opposite side of the arena every time he'd do it. If I was unable to get out of the area quick enough, I was basically dead. Overall, I found the fight to be challenging and enjoyable, just not as memorable as some of the others. In 8th, I've got the Corrupted Parade Master. I thought this was an awesome evolution of the original Parade Master that you'd beaten right at the beginning of the game. It looks really cool and fits in so well with this theme of puppets fusing with the diseased creatures we've seen all over the place up until this point. This is the only main boss in the game without an opening cutscene, but the game makes up for it by tying it into the story in another way. At this point, Hotel Krat is under attack. The Stargazers are unfunctional, and the only way to get back to the hotel is through this thing. He has a lot of the same moves as before, but mixes in new ones that really threw me off my first few attempts. The slam attack that had once been my bread and butter was now followed with a flurry of swipe attacks which killed me twice. He also has the ability to spawn an enemy from his head, but it's not too quick or aggressive, and I'm pretty sure the main boss can damage it as well. He can also do a few attacks that inflict a K, one being an area of effect that sucks to get hit by, but it looks pretty cool. This boss unfortunately suffers from a low health bar, so it only took me 4 tries to figure out how to react to the new moves and beat him. But he's fun, aggressive, and a unique boss, and just adds to the mood of the level as a whole. I just felt like he was a bit too easy, but that could just be because of my build. And I know a lot of people are complaining about how many 2 phasers are in the game, but I was kind of hoping for a second one, because I just love the design of this thing and would have liked to spend some more time fighting it. Before I continue, I'd like to say that all bosses beyond this point are absolutely incredible, and if this were a lesser game, each of them could be worthy of being the best. But this is not a lesser game. This is Lies of P. Ranking in an honorable 7th is the Scrapped Watchman. This fight was the first in the game that truly intimidated me. He's big, he's agile, and he hits hard. First phase has a 3-piece combo where he windmills his arms around, and while the timing threw me off at first, it soon became a reliable way for me to build up stagger and sneak in a few hits along the way. His other moves in this phase were harder for me to parry, but still not impossible. If anything, I was still able to dodge, so it wasn't that big a deal. The second phase threw me off guard, as he is now imbued with electric might. His electric attacks at first seem unfair, as they made it harder for me to close the gap between the Watchman and myself for attacks. But the lightning has a delayed timing, so once I understood where and when it will strike, I found that it only enhanced the dynamic of the encounter, like throwing some pepper flakes on a pizza. Along with being a fun fight, this boss is also equipped with an interesting backstory. Newspaper article 1124 reveals that the Watchman had a strong bond with the Children of Krot. So strong in fact that the city council saw it as a problem. So in a way, this guy was kinda like the Iron Giant, which makes me think, would he willingly be part of this puppet frenzy? Is he trying to hurt children? Is he really a bad guy? And with the responses from the guy in the window after blowing this whistle, it seems as if the Watchman is still held in high regards by a child who used to enjoy his company. So what am I really doing fighting this gentle giant? Oh yeah, that's right. Geppetto told me I can't progress in the story unless I kill it.
Use the Stalker's key to open the bridge door. Then, get rid of the frenzied puppets that have seized City Hall.
Thanks, Dad. In 6th is Simon Manus. This is the one boss that was affected by patch 1.02 that I didn't get to in time. It sucked because I was absolutely tearing through his first health bar almost every time. It would have been nice if the patch were optional and I could have chosen to opt out of it until I completed the game, because I would have liked to see how his original health bar would have impacted how many resources I had going into phase 2. His moves are awkward but readable. He swings his weapon exactly how you'd expect a knockoff Quasimodo to swing one. He leaves sizable windows to attack, and his moves are pretty telegraphed. Sometimes he'll switch up his follow-ups, but mostly I felt like I knew what he was going to do before he did. While phase 1 may have been a walk in the park, his second was no joke. His melee attacks have different timings and are harder to read now. He also now has a variety of projectiles he'll throw at you, all with different timings. They're not too tough to handle except for a wave attack that would often lead to a follow-up that would kill me. But that's only because I didn't do the right ladder upgrade that allows you to roll after getting knocked down. So who's really at fault there? Regardless, the move still frustrated me beyond belief. He summons a giant hand from the sky that does an AoE attack about midway through the phase, but it takes a while to build up, so I found it pretty easy to avoid. I felt like the fight forced me to be very aware of my surroundings and find opportunities within the chaos. Even though the boss would sometimes keep its distance from me, I didn't find it frustrating trying to close a distance. Often if I just waited, the boss would come back to me. As both a spectacle and a fight, it sort of felt like the Elden Beast, except if it were actually done well. Starting us off in the top 5 is the Puppet King. I had a lot of fun in phase 1. The first part of this phase is simple and allowed me to acclimate to the new set of moves. He does a spinning arm slam attack that was very easy to parry. This move helped to build up his stagger meter quickly and easily. After you take away enough health, he moves to a more aggressive and diverse set of attacks. These moves were a lot more difficult to parry, at least for me. They had odd timings and sometimes he'd swing 2 arms at once, so even if I blocked the first, the second one would hit me. I didn't know what to do about his large AoE attacks, so I ended up just running as far away from the boss as possible. but the move has such a wide range that sometimes I'd still get hit. I think you can heavy attack him out of it, but I never tried, so that might just be a me problem. The second phase felt overshadowed by the first. I felt more inclined to play passive, bait out attacks I knew had a large window for a follow-up, and wait for attacks I thought were easier to read, rather than fighting him head-on and trying to learn the moveset through trial and error. Romeo is just a prick. Sometimes he lights his sickle on fire and does a combo that just doesn't end and was super hard for me to dodge, sorta like a mini waterfowl dance. I would have tried learning the timings to parry, but without perfect blocks the overheat status would build up, and missing a block entirely will result in massive damage. At this point in the fight, I just wanted to be done with it. On my winning run, he used this attack for the second time during that phase, and I only clutched it out thanks to the power of the Aegis.
No! Yes! Yes! Let's go!
This is the power of the Aegis.
By the time I finally won, I still felt like I didn't fully understand Romeo's moveset. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but like I said, I think that's because I was afraid that experimentation would lead to a quick death. I personally don't think that patch 1.02 is necessary, but if it helps people explore Romeo's phase a bit more than they would have, then maybe it's not the worst thing in the world. Coming in fourth is Luxasia, or as I like to call her, the Iron Maiden. After reaching the hotel after the corrupted parade master, your maiden Sophia is nowhere to be found. Strange, I thought. Maybe she was kidnapped along with Geppetto. Little did I know that I'd actually have to fight her. Her first phase felt intense, but fair for a late game boss. Some of her moves are odd, but they all felt fair. Her moves match what she is, a lady with a giant freaking sword, and after every one of her combos she leaves a wide opportunity to get hits in. I despise getting hit by her command grab, but I don't hate that she has the move. It sometimes felt like my dodge should have been enough to avoid getting hit, but getting hit by it didn't make me feel like my run was over. Breaking the shield on her back was a fun little detail that I didn't expect. Before I realized you could break it, I'd get annoyed that I missed another opportunity to get a hit in. But once I realized, I didn't mind. And I like how depending on what you do, it will either be intact or remain broken during the next phase. Phase 2 felt unfair and extremely annoying at first. It starts off with her throwing a bunch of lightning at you, then hurling herself at you from the air, without any time to react. I never confidently got the timing down to block this move and would almost always take massive damage right out the gate. If you do perfect block it though, it leaves a sizable window for you to punish. I learned later on down the line that you can actually parry the electric projectiles back at her, like I'm in Sekiro or something, and it helped a lot. The more I fought this phase, the more I was able to rely on my instincts. It's always a nice feeling when I find myself in a flow state, like I'm reacting organically to the movements of the enemy. By the time I'd beaten her, my appreciation in this phase had definitely grown to the point where I'm looking forward to doing it again in New Game Plus. I love the fact that you're fighting your own maiden. The only other game I can think of where this happens is Sekiro, when you fight Emma. And I didn't really feel good about that. In Lies of P, you're essentially freeing your maiden from the control of Simon, which makes the victory all the more rewarding. Now this next pick might get me a lot of hate, but I don't mind. My opinion is mine. It belongs to me.
You cannot take my booty.
Coming in third is the Green Monster of the Swamp. I had a lot of fun fighting this thing. This boss has an awesome design, it has an awesome set of attacks, and I found its backstory to be one of the most thought-provoking in the entire game. This fight felt fair and balanced. It wasn't too easy, it wasn't too hard, it was just right. The fast pace of its first phase always felt exciting. The monster starts the fight by either burrowing itself underground and jumping out at you, or running at you headfirst with an unblockable attack. The unblockable attack has an odd timing, so I'd often get hit with it, but the burrow attack was easy for me to dodge. Aggression is rewarded, as the monster is easily staggered. Staying in its face yielded a high damage output, and the monster's response to this tactic was relatively predictable. Every time it screamed, it would do a specific combo. I saw this combo as a golden opportunity to do massive damage. I'd perfect block the first swipe and then dodge to the side, resulting in the rest of the combo missing completely. If there's distance in between you and the monster, it can hit you with the tendrils on its back or spew a stream of acid at you, both of which build decay, which is pretty cool. Phase 2 feels familiar since it shares some of its moveset with the Scrap Watchman, but with that extra feral aggression that you see from the monster in Phase 1. The Watchman's moves gave me reliable opportunities to perfect guard and build up stagger, while the new moves were just fun to witness. His frog hops were not hard to deal with, but on my winning attempt he started spamming the move, which was kind of annoying. I am not 100% positive about this theory, but I am confident that the conjoining of the monster and the Watchman is a reunion of sorts. It just so happens the Scrapped Watchman, the thing we know to be children's best friends like Frosty the friggin' Snowman, is found in the nest of a monster that plays with the bodies of scrapped puppets, kinda like a child would. And this Scrapped Watchman is the puppet that this monster chooses to fuse with.
Coincidence? I think not!
Since we know that in this world, consciousness can exist outside the death of the body in the form of ergo, maybe this monster is the amalgamation of the consciousness of those slum children who were thrown out of the streets of crap, once again playing with the husk of their old friend like they used to. And although I've yet to confirm this theory fully, I really think I'm onto something. Brace yourself for another hot take. Coming in second place is the first Black Rabbit Brotherhood fight. This is my favorite gang fight of all time. What made this fight so good has to do with how I felt from my first attempt to when I finally overcame the challenge and beat them. This boss was absolutely butchering me in the beginning. The main brother is quick and unrelenting and does massive freaking damage. Even when I started to be able to last longer than 10 seconds after entering the arena, I was not feeling confident in my ability to win. When his first brother first jumped in, my heart absolutely sank. I felt hopeless. I questioned if I would ever be able to progress in this game. I thought, if this is only the 5th main boss, then how in the hell am I going to be able to beat the future bosses? I felt like quitting the game forever. But I kept trying. I kept failing. And slowly, I got better. I got good enough at parrying the rabbit, where eventually his sword broke.
Boom! Broke it!
With the main bunny now doing significantly less damage than before, I knew victory was inevitable. The sense of accomplishment I felt after overcoming what seemed to be an impossible task was unsurpassed. And I think a large reason why that was the case was because of how this boss was designed. When a new rabbit jumps into the fight, they will be the main aggressor. The main black rabbit will lay off and stay passive outside of a sprinting slash he'll do from time to time. The move is telegraphed by a distinct and easily heard grunt, so you'll know it's coming even if you're not looking at it. I like that they opted for an auditory cue for this move, because it doesn't make the move feel overwhelming, while still forcing you to temporarily divert your attention from the other foe. Two of his brothers aren't too strong, and are easily backstabbed, but still offer some challenge. But the little bunny was very frustrating to deal with for me. I think he's a piece of shit. That bunny's kick attack that sends you flying into the air defies all physics. It makes absolutely no sense, and I hate it. I hate that fucking bunny.
That's so stupid! When does it end? And I can't get up!
Another thing that I liked about this fight is that it had me thinking tactically. I realized that the side rabbit jumps in based on the main one's health bar, not the passage of time. So on my winning attempt, I opted to break the rabbit's blade before having to deal with any of them, to make him much less of a threat the remainder of the fight. Overall, this was a stellar gank fight. And then you have to fight him again. This second fight takes everything I liked about the first and turns it completely on its head. In the first fight, you had to fight the main brother first and the others periodically. This fight has you deal with the 3 side brothers at the same time. Only one of them will be aggressive at first, but the other 2 will use projectiles to mess up your flow. and the aggressive one's weapons will be imbued with status effects. The worst one being the bunny, of course, who imbues his weapon with acid. If you're unlucky enough to get hit to the point where the decay meter fills up, the durability of your weapon will melt away, making this encounter that much more annoying. While the first fight was in an open area, this has a bunch of obstacles everywhere. So sometimes when I'd go for a swing, my scythe would bounce off a pillar or a pile of trash. Once you take out 2 of the rabbits, the big brother will erupt from his casket and join the fight, regardless of how much health the other brother has left. This forces you to whittle down the Three Stooges' health bars enough so that after you're done killing 2 of them, you can immediately kill the 3rd. And this was absolutely tedious. For whatever reason, I found it hard to parry the main brother's attacks this time around, even though they're the same fucking thing. And I would have opted to relearn, but every time I'd die, I'd have to fight the first 3 brothers again and again. This cycle of tedium made me break my vows, and I unapologetically item spammed the life out of the big rabbit, so that I could secure the W and move the fuck on with my life.
You don't get extra points for fighting fair. Survive and win.
You're such a little shit, aren't you?
I hated this fight so much, and found it so odd that they'd opt for this design after proving they were completely capable of making a gank fight as good as the first one. It was a real slap in the face, and I now have to live with myself knowing that I item spam my way through a part of this game. Thanks a fucking lot.
Fuck that fight. Fuck that fight. God, that was terrible.
And taking first place as the best boss in Lies of P is the Nameless Puppet. This fight caught me off guard. I was certain that Simon Manus was the last fight. But thanks to Geppetto being an absolute piece of shit, I got to fight this guy. This fight has atmosphere. This fight has gravitas. The way the puppet moves with the strings glowing above his head looks absolutely phenomenal. The music is beautifully disturbing and perfectly fits the twisted circumstance you find yourself in. Geppetto wants to steal your heart and bring his dead son back to life, so he could do God knows what with him after.
But a father always looks after his children. Even naughty ones that must be punished. Like you.
What?
And you won't stand for it.
Give me your heart.
I'm gonna refuse. You're a freaking creep, dude.
I believed you were a good boy. But you insist on breaking my heart.
I fucking hate you, Geppetto.
This was another fight where I was getting sliced to bits within the first moments of entering the arena. But as I figured out more and more of his moves, the fight became more and more fun. This fight probably had my favorite flow in the game, and parrying felt great. He has a 4-piece combo that I could rely on. I was usually able to perfect block at least the last 2 hits, and was able to follow up with an attack of my own after. He switches his moves midway through the phase, and I definitely found those harder to deal with, but it all felt fun. Phase 1 became much less threatening as I continued to try. At a certain point, I was consistently getting to Phase 2 without issue. Phase 2 is even more intense than the first. He's extremely quick, aggressive, and leaves less openings to attack. Has a wide arsenal of moves, and does massive damage. This was another example of a phase feeling near impossible, but after everything else that the game had thrown at me up to this point, I knew I could do it. This phase includes a move where he skewers you and moves his non-existent mouth in just the oddest and most uncomfortable of ways.
Fuck, no. No! How does he fucking do that every time? Stop talking to me. Fucking dick. Get up.
And while I normally hate getting command grabbed, this animation was so awesome it almost made it feel worth it. This fight puts all the skills I'd accumulated through my playthrough to the test. Learning which moves should be blocked and which ones were better off being dodged was a fun and fulfilling puzzle. This is one of the few bosses where I felt like I didn't have much of a choice but to switch weapons. For the majority of the game I used the Salamander Dagger, but it felt absolutely useless against this puppet. I opted for the live puppet's axe blade because it looks super badass, with the booster glaive handle to help close the gap between me and the boss while charging heavy attacks, and I found it to be an extremely effective strategy. This boss was just the most awesome of experiences, and I hope that everyone chooses to not give Geppetto their freaking heart, because number one, he doesn't freaking deserve it. He's a fucking creep.
You're the puppet who would bring my son back to life.
Your son's dead, dude. gonna have to fight Geppetto now. Goodbye. Goodbye, you freak.
I'm disappointed in you.
And number 2, this was just such a fun fight. It was just the best. It was the best fight in the game. What am I gonna do? Best fight in the game. That's it. That's my ranking of Liza P's major bosses. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to like and subscribe, and leave a comment about which bosses you thought were fun and which ones you hated. I'd love to hear from you. If you hated my list and everything I represent, that's fine too. Let me know why in the comment section as well. I wonder what we disagree about. Either way, I'm Eating Beetle, and thanks for watching my video. I truly appreciate it.